Hey moms, we are not perfect, but with God's help, we can be superhero moms with superpowers. Proverbs 31:28. Her children rise up and call her blessed. By the end of this message, we will have an opportunity to see how one of Israel's greatest kings, King Solomon, stood, gave his mom honor, and blessed her. So I never thought I could be a mom. I hated babysitting, didn't want to be a mom, doing everything we could do to not become parents. And then one day I got sick, and the sickness never went away. And being doctor averse, I wouldn't go to the doctor. I was just trying everything I could over the counter. So one day, my husband decided maybe I was pregnant and I should take a pregnancy test. Bite your tongue, husband David. But I went into the bathroom with the stick. I came out of the bathroom with the stick and I handed the stick to my husband and I sat down in fear and trepidation. He started smiling. I was pregnant. I was doomed. I couldn't do this. I didn't want to do this. Heaven help me. It was going to be the end of my life. But you know what? There are no perfect parents. There's been one perfect child, and his name was Jesus. And God had Mary and Joseph to raise him. And they lost him. They lost him for 3 days. Can you imagine having to answer to God for that? So the archangel comes down, he whisks them up before God, and God goes, Mary, what happened? And Mary goes, God, we thought he was with our group. And it's like 3 days. We thought he was with our group. We didn't know he wasn't with our group until we finally started looking for him. I'm not sure that's a conversation I want to have with God. But I can tell you, I haven't lost my child for 3 days. So I'm at least doing better than Mary and Joseph. We give ourselves grace and mercy. And moms, we can be superheroes with superpowers. We just need to lean into the superpowers that God provides us. So let's look at some of the superhero moms in the Bible and discover what their superpowers are. So we're going to start with the story of Hannah. And Hannah's superpower is prayer. Hannah was married to a guy by the name of Elkanah. Elkanah had a second wife by the name of Peninnah. Whereas Hannah was unable to have children, Elkanah had lots of sons and daughters. So there was a huge rivalry going on with Peninnah and Hannah. Peninnah would provoke her and tease her and bully her until she cried. Hannah never retaliated. Instead, she turned to the Lord and she prayed. 1 Samuel 1:10, in her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she continues to pray, and she's praying so intently but quietly that the priest sees that her mouth is moving, and he thought she was drunk, but she wasn't drunk. She was just troubled, and she was praying out of her anguish and her grief. And so she shares with him, I am not drunk. Don't think that I'm a wicked woman. And when he understands that she is turning to the Lord in her desperate need in prayer, he says, go in peace, and may the Lord answer your prayer. And so she brings the priest into her prayer needs. And we can do the same. When we are deep in prayer, when we have great needs, we can not only pray, but we can ask others to encourage us and to be in prayer with us. In 1 Samuel 1:20, Scripture tells us that in God's timing, Hannah became pregnant, and she gave birth to a son, and she named him Samuel. And she named him Samuel because that means, I asked the Lord for him. She gave God the credit when God answered her prayer. Hannah was a mom of prayer. Her superpower was prayer. And prayer can be our superpower too. We can pray for our babies. We can pray for their health, their salvation, for them to make wise choices, for the friends that they'll have, for their spouses. I pray for our daughters and their husbands. One's married, one day. So I pray that their husbands will be men after God's own heart. And according to Ron Edmondson, a man after God's own heart is a man of humbleness, reverence, respect, trust, love, devotion, praise, faithfulness, obedience, and repentance. It is never too early or too late to be a supermom and use your superpower of prayer. Now we're going to look at Eunice. Eunice has a superpower of faith. And Eunice is the mother of Timothy. Timothy we know of from a couple of books in the New Testament, 1st and 2nd Timothy, written by Paul, who was one of the early church planters. So 2 Timothy 1:5 says, I am reminded of your sincere faith, which first lived in your grandmother Lois and in your mother Eunice, and I am persuaded now lives in you also. And this is Paul encouraging Timothy in his faith and recognizing that Timothy grew up in a family that had faith and that his mom had raised him to be faithful. He became Paul's apprentice, and that's why we have this part of the Bible. He was sent by Paul to Corinth to deliver what we call 1 Corinthians and to help resolve some problems that were in that Corinthian church. But you know what? He was not perfect. Timothy was not perfect. He was not able to resolve whatever that situation was. And so Paul had to send somebody else, Titus, on the second time around in order to get that church turned around and on the right path. So you might think that Timothy was a failure, but no, Timothy was not a failure. Proverbs tells us in Proverbs 22:6, train your children to live the right way, and when they are old, they will not stray from it. Timothy, all through his life, he made mistakes, he was not perfect, but he always came back to his faith. And faith can be our superpower too as we raise our children. We can help them, with Bible study. We can sing with them praise songs. We can take them to church. We can get them involved in small group work, in children's ministry, in youth ministry, in all kinds of ministries to help them develop their faith. When we were dropping our youngest daughter off at Virginia Tech, I was so scared. We were sending her away and leaving her there, and I didn't feel like I had shared everything she needed to know to be a young woman of faith. And so in those last few minutes, I'm downloading all the mom stuff to her. And she finally looked at me and she said, Mom, stop. I've watched your life all my life, and I know how to live my life of faith. I'm going to be okay. That helped me. That helped me a lot. Moms, we can be superheroes by helping our children live lives of faith. Okay, so our next superhero mom is Jochebed. Now, how many of you have ever heard of Jochebed? Well, Jochebed is almost anonymous in the Bible, but we know her as the mother of Moses. Moses brought the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt, and he's the one who received the 10 Commandments from God. But Jochebed, when she was pregnant with Moses, was trying to be anonymous. And she was trying to be anonymous because the Pharaoh had ordered all of the boy babies to be killed. Now, of course, she didn't know yet if she was having a son or a daughter, but, hey, 50-50 chance she was going to have a little boy. So just kind of trying to be anonymous, trying to slip in and out of crowds and things like that. Anyway, her superhero power was protection. And she did great things to protect her son, Moses. So when he was born, she realized he was a special baby. He was not ordinary. He was fine. He was beautiful. He was a precious child. How many of you have had a firstborn baby? Aren't they wonderful? Aren't they special? Aren't they amazing? Second babies are too. And he was a third baby. So he was special, and he was wonderful, and he was amazing. And she had to protect him. She just had to protect him. And when he was 3 months old and she could no longer hide him, she devised a great plan. And in the plan, she put him in a papyrus basket, and she coated it with pitch and tar and stuff like that. And then she sent it down the river. And then she had her daughter, a little bit older than Moses, stand by on the sidelines and kind of watch to see what was going to happen. Now, it just so happened that the day that this happened, the princess was in the river taking her bath. And when she saw the basket, she sent one of her slaves over to retrieve the basket. And when she opened the basket, Moses was crying, and she had compassion. And when the sister saw that the princess was compassionate, she stepped forward and said, "Do you want me to get a Hebrew woman to nurse him for you?" And when the princess said yes, Moses' sister ran and got their mom, and their mom got her baby back. Not only that, but the princess protected Moses by paying his mom to nurse him. And a few years later, when he was weaned, he was sent to the palace and was then raised by Pharaoh's daughter, the princess. But he had been protected and taken care of. Superhero moms have protected their babies forever. All superhero moms protect their babies. We know that in Pompeii, women have been found literally wrapped around their little babies and their children, trying to protect them from the volcano that took all of their lives. Most of us will never encounter a volcano, but we'll encounter other hard things that we will have to protect our children from. Bullies at school. We put safety latches on our kitchen cabinets. We put our kids in car seats. We do all of these things to protect our children. We test to see how warm and how hot things are so they don't burn their little mouths. And as they get older, we encourage them to do the right things and not do the wrong things, and help them to see how they can be protected. When I was younger, when I was a kid growing up, my dream was to have horses and to ride horses. And when I got on staff at a church in Maryland, one of the ladies came to me and said, "Do you ride horses?" And it's like, I'd love to ride horses. She had 2 horses, and one of which was never ridden. And she offered me the opportunity to ride 2 to 3 times a week for free. It was awesome. It was the dream come true. I had all the advantages of owning a horse and none of the expenses. So 2 to 3 times a week, either at lunch or after work, I would go over and I would ride, and I loved it. It was awesome. And then I got pregnant. And at the first doctor's appointment, my husband told the doctor that I was riding horses, and she said, "Not anymore." And so I gave up my dream in order to protect my precious daughter, Danielle. So superhero moms protect their babies. Our 4th mom is Bathsheba. And sometimes Bathsheba gets a bad rap, but you know what? She was a superhero mom. She was a superhero mom to one of the best known kings that Israel ever had, Solomon. And her superpower was advocacy. Sometimes she's just considered a secondary or even a tertiary character in King David's story. But you know what? She's the primary character in Solomon's story, and she advocated for her son. At some point in Solomon's childhood, King David told Bathsheba that Solomon would be king after him. Solomon was not the oldest son. He was not even the second oldest son. He was further down in the lineage. But David saw something in him, and he promised Bathsheba that Solomon would be king. As King David was lying on his deathbed, old and running out of energy, his older son decided to stage a coup. And he got together all the officials, and he had this great feast, and he set himself up as king. And Bathsheba found out about it. And she went to King David and reminded him of his promise. And then he reassured her that he would stand up to his son and put Solomon on the throne. Bathsheba had transformed from a quiet, unassuming shadow character into a strong superhero mom who advocated for her son. And her son became king after David. Superhero moms, we all can be advocates for our children. We can advocate for our children when it comes to doctors and medical professionals, when it comes to teachers and school officials, when it comes to family and friends who are trying to lead them astray. We can advocate for our children. We can even advocate for them when they're confused about themselves. We can help them see who they truly are, and we can be their advocates. Years ago, when our youngest daughter graduated from high school, she got a degree. She went to high school, but she also got VOTEC credit and a degree certification from Virginia Beach VOTEC in radio and television production. And when she went to college, she wanted to continue in that field. And people were like, "What's she gonna do with that?" And we're like, she's good at that. And even if she doesn't follow through with that, she still will have a degree from Virginia Tech. And you know what? Having a degree from Virginia Tech, it ain't a bad thing. So she went to Virginia Tech her sophomore year in Virginia Tech. She got hired as a student employee in the Performing Arts Building. And then after she graduated, she got a permanent hourly position. And during COVID, she used her talent and ability from Virginia Beach VOTEC to help transform their 1,200-seat main stage theater into a virtual performance hall where they live streamed concerts from around the world and to around the world. And that was all a part of her training. And just recently, she got promoted to salary with benefits. I'm so glad we advocated for her to do what she felt good about. And she still has a degree from Virginia Tech, and she's using her talents and her abilities. Friends, moms, we can be superhero moms by advocating for our children and helping them to become all that God wants them to be. Okay, moms. This final piece of Bathsheba's story can also be our story. When Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her. He bowed down to her and sat down on his throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. He rose to give her honor. He bowed to her. He brought in a throne and had her sit at his right hand. And in doing that, he gave her a position of respect and authority in the kingdom. Proverbs 31:28 says, "Her children rise up and call her blessed." And we see here that Solomon rose up and honored his mom, giving her the blessing of a lifetime. Moms, we can be just like this. We can be superheroes with the superpowers of prayer, faith, protection, and advocacy. Moms, we are not perfect, but with God's help, we can be superhero moms with superpowers. Here at Journey Church, we take time to reflect. And during this next worship song, I would like for you to take time to reflect on this question. How are you relying on God for your superpowers of prayer, faith, protection, and advocacy?
moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire and the darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Yeah. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, surrender now. I give you everything. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me.
Hey, I hope Dr. Jesse's message was powerful for you. It was for me, and I'm praying that you will understand that God has crafted you to have these superpowers of prayer, faith, protection, and advocacy. And so if you would like prayer, if you're worried about being a mom or a dad, you're worried about being a parent, if you would like prayer, we would love to pray for you. Just utilize the prayer card on the JC app. It's easy to get to. It's right there. And so use that. If you need counseling, we have a partner called HopeWell Counseling Ministries, and they would love to talk to you and encourage you and help you in any way they can. And then finally, Dr. Jessie said that, if you'd like to talk to her personally, you can have her email. It is kjessie@thebridgenet.org. That's kind of confusing for me because I think of .net. So anyway, hey, listen, we'll put it down there so you can see it. I'm praying that you not only realize that you have a superpower, that God gifts you with it, that you can trust God in faith to continue to empower you to be the parent you probably think you're not able to be. But with God's power, you can be. And more than that, listen to me. You're going to have friends in life who are going through the same things you are, struggling, wondering if they're being a good mom or a good dad. And you have this truth that we know that God can empower them. Can you tell them about this person, Jesus? Can you encourage them that there's always hope, that He can bring healing and He can make them whole? Can you do that? Because that's what we're called to do as followers of Christ. With that, I tell you, church, you are sent.